All right. Well, welcome everyone. You would have to have been under a rock in the past 2 to 3 years not to have seen the momentum building up at Cyera. I've seen people I know go there. I've seen funding announcements. I've seen industry commentary. You just feel looking at from the outside in, there's something happening at Cyera, which is why I'm delighted to have Steve Roge, the VP of Sales at Cyera, join us today. Steve, welcome. How are things going with you today?
Thank you. Thank you. Very exciting times. Things are going well. Appreciate it. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, this should be fun. We've got a couple of different things to cover. First thing, the reason that I kind of even reached out in the first place, Steve, I don't know if you saw what I showed on LinkedIn about this, but I did some analysis using Richard Steenan's IT Harvest dashboard about the fastest growing COVID baby cybersecurity companies, and I'm using headcount as the proxy for growth. And my other criteria was not name Wiz because that would kind of blow the chart a little bit. And top of the line was Island. I've had Eric Apple as the head of sales of Island on the podcast about 2.5 years ago, actually, just as they were getting going. So they've gone from strength to strength. And then obviously behind Wiz, I had Colin Jones from Wiz on a couple of years ago now, actually almost the week, my episode with Colin, who was the first CRO over at Wiz, took it from zero up to that 100 million announcement. So he was on. And now Cyera, based on the analysis I did, is next one up, right? So you guys are on a heck of a tear. If you can't read this graph, basically what it's saying is that there's 15 companies growing really, really fast by headcount. Top without Wiz is Island. Second without Wiz is Cyera. So this is a good time for everyone.
Very exciting times. Yeah, and all friends. So know those guys well. Great people. We spend a lot of time talking to each other.
Yeah, CyberStart's originally companies as well, right?
Yes. Yes. Both. Correct.
All right. Well, we are recording this live on LinkedIn. If you're watching in on the feed coming through, put questions into the chat area if you have any, and we'll filter through them and see what we can get to. But Steve, first of all, let's get to know a little bit more about you. So I have, believe it or not, a list of 49 personal questions here. The good news is I don't ask you 49. I have this completely random number generator here, and it does an amazing thing. It's actually so advanced I have to protect it. I'm using, you guys don't know this, but I'm using Cyera's DSPN to protect it so no one can steal my algorithm behind the scenes here. And it's going to spit out 3 random questions for you. Let me just hit the button here. Trust me, there's some stuff going on in the background. Let's see what it throws up. All right, the first one is number 19. How did you make money as a kid, Steve?
Oh boy. First generation American. So I can tell you that my parents were very committed to me working early in life, and so my wife or my mom actually made a fake ID for me when I was 15 years old, so that I could work at the local grocery market. And then soon after that, my dad pushed me into working on roofs. And as a guy that's afraid of heights, I think that was a little bit by design. He wanted to show me, what hard work meant, and really push me to, to continue to educate myself so that I didn't have to do the manual labor that I so desperately didn't want to do while he was forcing it.
Your mom got you a fake ID though?
Yeah, she worked at a bank, and she laminated basically a fake ID when I was 15, because in order to work at the grocery store you had to be 16. So she made me an ID that suggested I was 16 years old, so I could start working when I was 15 years old.
You didn't go for 21, right?
True story. True story. Yep. I was, doing the typical pushing carts and then working in produce, the whole, all the fun of it.
Very good. All right, let me press the random generator here again and see what we get to. All right, number 29. What's a memorable moment in your sales work life that you want to share with us today?
Oh, memorable moment. There's quite a few. I've had the great fortune of working for some incredible leaders that have really kind of shaped kind of how I go to market. Memorable, to tell you a funny story, I'll never forget when I was at F5, we did a QBR in the city, in downtown Chicago, and my SE and I were outside the restaurant, and I remember seeing Vince Vaughn, and I was so excited, local Chicago celebrity, big Cubs fan. And I ran up to him and I was like, Vince, huge fan. Can I take a picture with you? And he goes, why don't you turn around and run right back to where you came from? And I was like, oh, all right. Well, that's a pretty humbling experience. That's certainly that got a lot of laughs because my SE, didn't feel short of telling everybody about that moment. So
Well, they say you don't meet your heroes sometimes, right? There's an example why you don't do that.
I have a different perspective of Vince Vaughn from that day moving forward.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, right? All right, let me hit the number again and get the last completely random question out of here. Number 2, what is the story behind you getting your first role in cybersecurity sales?
So I studied computer engineering thanks to my brother-in-law. So I was studying the engineering at DePaul University. They had a course called Junior Experiential Learning, which the course credits were really to kind of push you into the field, to get a job in the career that you aspired to go into. And my brother-in-law was working at Checkpoint at the time. And there were a number of value-added resellers that he went to ask if I could do a 10-week kind of a course and work at one of the partners. And I had the great fortune of working for a company called Consultech, where I started a little bit in engineering and then quickly made the decision that I wanted to be in sales, and I've never looked back since that moment.
And was it an easy transition from the engineering side into sales?
For me, it was. I think I was early enough in my career. I was, 20 years old. So for me, being a people person was always, kind of where I aspired to kind of leverage the technical skill set that was given to me at DePaul. And so I never really worked on the engineering side of the house from the beginning. So that, it was an incredibly easy transition.
Good for you. Good career after making that switch over. Well, let's talk about data protection, Steve. So quickly, I want to talk about myself. I'm going to make a big faux pas here and talk about myself quickly. I sold my first cybersecurity product in 1998, believe it or not, and it was a email and file encryption product. And since then, I've sold DLP, both network and host-based DLP. I've sold laptop encryption, data access control. I sold encryption again at another company. Basically my thread through my whole career is around data protection. So I've kind of got the scars along the way about what it's been like, over the years to actually try and get attention, try and get people to buy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the kind of takeaways is that I always felt like people had great intentions to protect data, but they almost backed off a little bit. Say, well, if we screw it up and don't get it quite right, we could really do some bad stuff here. We could hamper the business. We'll get execs complaining and all the rest of it. Let's just not quite do it in the best way. And in fact, the dirty little secret about DLP back in the day was most of it was DLM. It was data loss monitoring, not actually preventing too much because people don't want to block. So
Sure.
Let's fast forward to today, modern data protection, DSPM space. What's the state of the world of DSPM right now? What are security teams actually looking at and viewing the role of DSPM in the world?
Yeah, I mean it's a hot category, no question. And I think there's excitement around the fact that there's actually technology and modern architectures that are actually allowing you to solve those problems, right? I think historically it's been a very manual effort and one that was incredibly difficult to achieve given the vast volumes of data that exist within the enterprise space. So I think one of the great fortunes that Cyera has is that we were built 3.5 years ago, so we were able to really take advantage of modern architecture and the world of large language models and machine learning, and it gives us the ability to actually scale to the volumes and vast size of organization's data set. So that's making people very excited. I think they're still very skeptical on the ability to actually go and chew through these amounts of data and have that level of speed and accuracy. And when you can demonstrate that, it becomes very powerful, and the interest gets very high.
And I always remember thinking about it as people want to know where their data is. There was the discovery, there was the finding aspect of it, there was the policy aspect, and then there was maybe some sort of enforcement. Where is DSPM now? Where's Cyera, I guess, now in terms of actually being able to enforce as well as using policies and discoveries.
Yeah, it's all those things, but I think it's getting even bigger than that, right? When you start looking at AI and the fact that you can now actually enable the business to monetize all that data that they have to really understand, you know, where is our data, what is our data, how can we protect our data, and how can we enable the business responsibly to utilize that data. So outside of just the threat landscape, you're also seeing the business start to want to monetize that data and use AI applications internally, building their own homegrown or using third parties, but they have a fundamental responsibility to make sure that they're securing that data while they're enabling it. And that's, I think, where Cyera comes in a big way.
Yeah, there used to be a thing when we did DLP engagements was in the REDA, we wanted legal in there, we wanted HR in there
Yeah.
because, there was implications. We found things in the POC. There was real
Yeah.
things that had to change.
100%. We talk constantly about creating a coalition of the willing. It's also what makes the sell pretty hard, right? You're talking to a lot of different personas. There's a ton of different value use cases across all the practitioners in the company, and so it's what makes enablement so fundamental to what we're doing at Cyera. We invest quite a bit in enablement, and that's why, because there's value that's being realized across the entire organization, and so you have to have many different personas inside of your meetings, because there's things that enable the business and there's things that protect the business, and we're fortunate to play a part across the entire chasm.
And you acquired a company, I think called Trail, was it a year ago, 2 years ago? Is that fully embedded now? Is that doing real DLP for you?
Yeah, so you think about the fact that I think we announced that acquisition of Trail about 6 months ago.
Oh, okay.
So to have that fully integrated, I think we just announced that most recently. I think it demonstrates the power of our engineering and product management teams, which is an explicit differentiator for us as a company. Like our company, from an engineering perspective, is best of breed.
In the DSPM space, there's the kind of legacy on-prem players moving into cloud, and then you have the newer like Cyera players in the cloud kind of maybe trying to move into the on-prem.
Mhm.
Is that what Cyera is looking to do, cover everything everywhere, or are you focusing just on the cloud?
No, focusing everywhere. We announced our on-prem capabilities about 13 months ago. So definitely have our roots and started within the cloud and SaaS space, and now have you know embarked on the objective of really kind of protecting the company and giving them that visibility regardless where the data resides. That's been a focal point in listening to our customers.
Okay. Let me clearly what you're doing is working, right? You see everything that's going on. I found your March 2025 press release that came out. Used some pretty interesting words, right? Fastest world record, fastest growing data security company. I don't know if it was. I don't know. I read some of this, Stephen. You can comment or not comment. Outpacing even the most successful security firms. Kind of alluding maybe that you're saying you kind of going faster than Wiz was back in the day. I don't know. Am I reading too much into this, or is this kind of how you're trying to thread the needle a little bit on saying what you're doing?
I'll leave that commentary to Jason Clark, who is a master class of all things strategy, and his marketing team that reports up to him. We've had a force multiplying effort from them, but what I can tell you is we admire Wiz. I don't think there's any startup that should suggest otherwise. And I think that we have our objectives, and we're really executing on those objectives. And we maintain a very customer obsessed kind of culture, and that's really driving positive results for us.
Yeah. One question for you, since you brought it up, right? I mean, I wonder um, how much pressure there is sometimes internally to a company such as Cyera, right?
Mhm.
That people benchmark themselves. We got to go as fast as Wiz, and it's just this thing. They hit this and they hit that. Is that something that you feel a sense around you, or do people kind of recognize you can't expect everyone just to be going that fast like they were?
Speed is definitely at the center of our culture, and we don't. It's our own kind of fabric, and certainly bringing Frank Slootman onto the board continues to really kind of push the speed. You know, the outcomes that we're seeing internally are very tangible. So when you see that, the entire company, like the sum of all parts, are operating with speed, and you know, speed is a force multiplier for the company, right? It allows us to do a lot of things, and that's what's happening. There's speed across the company in engineering. There's speed and even legal. Like you start to look at the sum of all parts. I think sales and go to market always gets a lot of the spotlight, but internally at Cyera, what's allowing us to have the success is that the entire company is operating with speed. And when you have that across the foundation of a company, um, the outcomes become very realistic. And so speed is something that we will always center on and focus on in terms of executing as fast as possible, because at the end of the day, we're trying to help our customers achieve what they're looking to accomplish, and speed is necessary.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go back to November 22, Steve. I think that's the month that you joined Cyera.
Hmm.
What did you think you were going to be doing in the first few months of joining? And was that what reality was, or did everything change in the first few weeks there?
When I first joined, I knew the company was going to be successful. Did I think it was going to be successful as fast as it's been? No. I mean, I'd be lying to you if I suggested otherwise. But I give a lot of credit to the founders, Yotam, Tamar, and the team, because they really allowed and gave latitude to a lot of the people that they hired, and they gave us the ability to build the foundation right. So, like, if I told you, Andrew, my first two hires were not salespeople, it was a head of operations and it was a head of sales engineering, and they did not come cheap. They were very successful throughout their careers. And when we made that decision as a company, it started to kind of permeate across all business units. And I think what that allowed us to do was really put ourselves in a position to build a strong foundation for which then we started to really grow on. And we had early success. We made a lot of very deliberate hires in the first 6 to 12 months, and it became a snowball effect, right? Like, you start seeing success and you just continue to iterate on it.
What's an example of a deliberate hire that you made that we might be surprised about?
My first hire was head of operations, and he has been a godsend to the company. And a very deliberate hire were my first three salespeople. I'd worked with them in the past, and they came here and found immediate success. And in the early days, when I joined, I think the company was maybe a year old. So we were buying time, right? We were buying time, and the only thing that affords you to do that is revenue. And so we were able to put some revenue on the board quickly, and that bought us some time. And then, products started to really outpace, and then we started to be able to really lean into the investment and kind of run a little bit hot on expense and start to really kind of invest into the company. And it proved very successful, because then the cohorts continued to deliver, and now we're here today.
I remember when I was talking to Colin when he was at Wiz, he said, he had to tear up the headcount plan every 6 weeks because they were just, growing so fast. It does kind of raise the question, like, you said you had your first three hires you knew, and then you layered on cohorts after that. How did you
Mhm.
know, or what metrics did you use, or what was the kind of internal planning to say, yeah, now is the right time to add the next cohort?
Yeah, I've been fortunate in that, I started my career at Foundry and then worked at F5, and then went to Forescout. And so I've seen different levels of companies, multi-billion, hundreds of millions, and then went startups. So I, I knew what good looked like, and I knew what timing looked like in terms of really pressing the gas pedal. And we've also, across the company, have incredible guidance from not only our board, but also, I have the fortunate luxury of talking to guys like Adam Aarons and Dave Schneider and Dan Fugere I'm having dinner with in 2 weeks, like guys that I really want to emulate and really learn from, and understand what they did and when they did it. I spend a lot of time talking to Jordan from Wiz as well. We probably talk, man, maybe 2 3 times a month. So I lean on folks that have done it before me, and in this at this level and this speed, because there's not a lot of them out there. And I take guidance, and then I make some of the decisions, and we work together as an executive team incredibly well, and it's a collective effort.
Yeah, so you figure out you get their advice about when to start pushing or pulling back a little bit in different areas.
Well, you at least get their perspectives, and the more perspectives you have, the more you have the ability to make an informed decision.
Yeah. One of my clients right now is kind of wrestling with this a little bit. They're growing faster than they thought. And what are the surefire ways to really piss off a salesperson is to mess around with their territory every few months, right? But you have to do it, right? A fast
Yeah.
growing company, right? There's only so much of the world that you can take. So, what have you learned about how to manage that whole setting expectations and then handling transitions and trying to keep people who are doing well motivated by not, taking away stuff all the time?
Yeah, we made the very calculated decision early on to set ourselves up in the pyramid approach. So we focused on the G2K from the get go. So people's territories haven't really changed much because from the beginning, everyone had a list of named accounts. The only way to really measure success and to see what's getting done is to have focus and to see what kind of gains are we making within the accounts that we really want to consider our ICP. So we took a very measured approach to make sure that we did this the right way from the beginning, so that you didn't have this situation where people, the company's growing and people feel like they're losing things. They're not at Cyera.
And if I'm an enterprise rep at Cyera, how many accounts am I covering then?
It depends. So we've now somewhat segmented into three different tiers, and so you have your traditional kind of majors that are probably right around 20 accounts. Enterprise has anywhere from 50 to 70, and then the commercial team that's more geographic.
Yes, that's 50 to 70 is plenty to deal with,
Still,
right?
yeah, I mean we
Yeah.
have we have a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember back in the day, always people get upset. Oh, I want to go at 25 accounts. I said, well, how many have you reached in the last 6 months? Well, 10. Okay, well, you got some room to get going.
And the smart reps, will realize that they'll actually do more with less. I know it's an old adage that people fight, but the truth is, you talk to successful sales reps, when they've made the most in their careers is when they focused in on three or four accounts and really gave their best effort into those accounts.
Yeah. You mentioned enablement before. I noticed in March 24, you brought in your head of sales enablement. Why was that the right time, basically just over a year ago, to bring that person in and start building on a function?
So that was when we made an investment internally on enablement even before that. So we had an individual. I mean, you want to talk about selfless? We moved him from in one executive position into at that time we were saying enablement was the number one thing. That was the number one thing, my biggest block that I wanted to tackle, and had a very selfless individual who went into that role and started building the content, building the practice, and then we made the huge investment of building that out into a full-blown team. And the reason for that is my job is to try to reduce ramp time as much as possible, and the only way to effectively do that is to really enable people as they come in. I think our onboarding and enablement, as people come in and they get into boot camps, I think it's world class. I'm incredibly proud of what the work the team has put together in that category. And so we made a collective decision as a company that was going to be something that we were going to invest in, and I'm really proud that we made that decision.
People have all sorts of different metrics about how to measure ramp time and make it faster. What are the ones that you guys have settled on?
There's a number. We from a data perspective, we crunch a lot of internal numbers, but it's dynamic. I don't think there's any static attribution that you can really look at for ramp time. But we have reps that have come in here and closed business within their first 30 days. For me, I really consider a fully ramped rep is when they're producing quarter on quarter on quarter the amount of pipeline that's required to meet the objectives, and they've hit a run rate. Not necessarily that they've had a successful quarter. I want to see the consistency, and proud to tell you that our first cohort, as of the beginning of this year, on average we are at 136% achievement across the board. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
I always think when teams are growing fast, business is growing fast, the temptation sometimes is to cut corners a little bit, right? We're salespeople. We're trying to find the easiest and fastest ways to make numbers. And remember, actually, I do remember this 2 years ago. I think it was at least the Cloudflare CEO went on an earnings call and said that he realized that during their huge growth phase, much of their sales team, and he used the phrase, had become order takers. And when the
uh,
market changed to them, they didn't really know how to sell that well. And he was kind of really, surprised and upset. So I guess, how are you thinking about enablement? How are you thinking about your leadership team to say, look, we got to do this properly?
yeah, again, we invest a lot in enablement, not only internally but also externally. So we're a very big advocate of the force management methodology. So cutting corners, doesn't really exist. As much as we subscribe to the science of professional selling, we also very much appreciate the art that's behind it too. So I don't want us to become a culture where it's just kind of a machine and there's no art and there's no genuine FaceTime with customers. I think one of the things that we do incredibly well is show up and be curious. You hear that a lot from most sales leaders. Like, you want to continue to have that curiosity, and you want to be professional. So you want to be disciplined about the way you run your campaigns. And I think that's what we've done from an enablement perspective incredibly well. And now we're really getting into spending an adequate amount of time with frontline leadership. I think it's the most important job, most critical job in a company. And so we're really doubling down on what we do to make sure that we enable those people to be incredibly successful as well.
Yeah, it's funny. First line management. You ask 100 heads of sales, and they'll say, "Yeah, they're most important people, super important, all the rest of it." And say, "Well, what are you doing to help them, be great managers and leaders?" And they kind of start looking at their feet and looking the other way and
Yeah,
changing things
it's
up, right?
guilty, right? I've been there before. You kind of expect so much from those people, but you don't really invest the time that's necessary. So, we do skip levels. Myself, I have 30 minutes on the books with every single frontline leader every month in the company, and we do use third parties to really train and elevate. Make sure that we're making the investment in them so that they know what's expected, what's required, and they feel like they're getting enabled and they feel like they're getting the resources from the company to do their job well.
On the last episode that we did, last live I did actually last week before, Rob Amesqua, the head of sales at Forescott, was on, and I was talking to him about what sort of people he looks for in that first level manager. What about you, Steve? What's important to you for your first level managers?
Yeah, I tell a story about it because I look for people that have the passion, and what I mean by that is, like, do you remember when you played some structured sports, either at high school or college? Remember that grind? Like, you'd wake up in the morning, it would be like weight training, then school, then 2 hours of practice. You'd run home, try to eat and do homework without falling asleep at the kitchen table. You did all those things because you wanted to win, not just exist. You wanted to be the best. And somewhere along the way, I feel like people lose that passion as they get into their career. And it's kind of mind blowing to me, right? Because if you think about our careers, it should be something that we love doing. It's what brings food to the table for our families. Like, it should be something that we want to continue to educate ourselves and invest as much as possible. So I look for people that have that level of passion, regardless how long they've been in the industry. I look for that even if they've never done frontline leadership before. I think that level of investment into the company is what really starts to differentiate those that'll be good at the job and those that'll be great at the job. So I look for the attributes within people, not necessarily what they've done previously.
And the other side to that is, promoting from within, right? It's the classic
Mhm.
thing. Well, you're a great salesperson, we'll make you into a leader. And then, people don't realize that there's overlap in terms of the job function is only about 20%. Yet we just expect them to figure out the other 80%. How you thinking about, internal promotions in that role?
It's incredibly important to me, and I think the reason that you see 20% success rate is because of what we talked about, 5 minutes ago. I don't think that businesses appropriately enable people to be frontline leaders. Like, think about it. It's not just a skill that people become awesome at. Like, you have to either A, have a leader on top of you that's training you and giving you a bunch of attention to learn how to do that job effectively, or B, the company has to make an investment to make sure that you're getting trained properly on how to be a frontline leader. And that's why we take those investments so seriously. I mean, I'm of the opinion that promoting from within, it would be like the number one path, so long as the folks that are running for those positions are capable and they have those attributes that I talked about earlier. And then we can make the investments to train them on how to do things from a science perspective the right way.
Yeah, it's such an important role, but it seems like people, you know, I don't know, you always feel like there's more bang for the buck to invest other places rather than that first line. But I would do it differently, like you are.
I feel like if you're going to suggest it's the most important role in the company, then there's a requirement to make the investment to train those people.
Absolutely. I mentioned to Eric Apple, the head of sales at Island, that you and I were going to talk, and he said to say to Steve, "Congrats on the rapid success and the value you guys are driving. Great to see the innovation execution. We'd love to get your thoughts on how things change on the journey. And these are his numbers he threw out there, from bigger 100 million plus versus
Mhm.
the first zero to whatever you're at right now. So, how are you thinking about the need to change and focus the go to market?
That's a really good question, and it's one that I think about a lot, right? Because my responsibility is to continue to have that consistency. We're 14 quarters in a row of sequential growth. I was looking at the spreadsheet that you kind of gave, and the company that is. I saw the metrics for the company. I forget the name of it. What was Cyber Donut?
Yeah.
So I was looking at that, and I saw last year Q1 was greater than the previous year's Q4, but then this year Q1 was far lower than Q4, and so I looked at that and I was like, that wouldn't fly at Cyera. And I think about that question quite a bit because there's always the suggestion of the people who got you to 25 aren't necessarily the people who get you to 50, aren't necessarily the people that get you to 100 and beyond. I don't subscribe to that. I think, so long as we continue to execute at a very high level, so long as we continue to monitor all the attributes that define a healthy business, so long as that we continue to make the investments in our people and we hire we maintain the bar of hiring at a very high level, you know, we'll continue to execute. And so that's the sole focus, is to really, you know, make the investments in the proper areas of the business and just continue to push forward.
I feel like that whole, is the right person to get you from here that got you there and all that sort of stuff. I think it all depends on, hey, the person, but also how proactive they are, right? You look at someone like Eric at Island, right? He was the first go to market almost person there, right? That came in and started building the team immediately. He's still there. They're doing really well. You look at someone like Ty Fag at Tanium, it
Hmm.
was in the first three salespeople at Tanium, and now he's, whatever it is, 10, 11 years later, he's, this CRO. You have to have the right person. And if you can proactively make the changes and adapt and do the right things, that's how you set yourself up to really be the right person going forward.
I completely agree. I think there has to be a level of humility for the individual to know what they're actually not great at, and then make the investments in yourself to get better. No one's perfect at everything right out of the gates, and I think if you have the humility to be self-aware and know where maybe your blind spots are, and then seek the advice and counsel of how to rectify some of those things and make the appropriate changes, then I think you're putting yourself in a position to be successful long term. And
Yeah.
so that's the culture we kind of permeate throughout the entire company.
All right, let's change things up a little bit, Steve. We're going to finish
Hmm.
up here with something a bit more lighthearted than go to markets planning and execution. It's time for a section I call visionary or high. I'm going to throw out some bold predictions about the future of sales and cybersecurity sales. You tell me. I'm in Colorado. Am I a
Okay.
deep thinking, insightful visionary, or did I wake and bake this morning with some Colorado Gorilla Glue
Okay.
before getting to my desk?
I
All
like
right.
this. This is
So you
fun.
just have to tell me, am I visionary or high? Here's number one. By 2030, so 5 years,
Hmm.
80% of cybersecurity purchases under 100K will happen without a human seller or a human buyer, just AI agents buying and selling. Is that visionary or am I high?
High. Not by 2030. And yeah, I fear the day that's the case. No, I don't think that's happening by 2030. Mm-mm.
Where would you where would you draw the line? Let's say by 2030, is it 50K ASP? Is it 20K? Is it 5K? It's going to happen somewhere, right?
It's going to happen somewhere. I think 100. What were we initially? What was the
100K.
original? 100K too much.
Yeah.
I think trivial things that 100K is that's a significant ASP.
Yeah.
I'd say somewhere along the lines of what in today's world corporates giving people a credit card that they can swipe and buy. Like I think that stuff will happen within the next 5 years. So somewhere in the longs of 20, maybe 20K.
All right. Yeah, that's interesting. It's going to be somewhere. It can't be zero, and 100 is too high, right?
Won't be
Um,
zero.
all right. In 10 years' time, both the RSA conference and Black Hat will be dead, completely gone. Visionary or high?
High.
Tell me
Too
more.
many people enjoy it too much.
just in
Yeah,
general.
in general. And it's, it truly fosters an environment where I think practitioners get to get the most out of 1 week. It's where they find out a lot about technology that they won't necessarily have the time to do. And put, again, talking about continuous education, like I think that week gives people that don't have, time on their side to go and consume as much knowledge as possible within, 5 days.
All right, next one. The biggest threat to a cybersecurity seller's success right now isn't the competition. It's their own ability to inspire a prospect to change. Is that visionary or is that high?
It's true. Yeah, that's I subscribe to that.
Yeah, the inaction is what is hard to overcome sometimes. All right, here's one, two more. By 2030, Shadur Saunders will have won a Super Bowl. Visionary or high?
High, high. Not
Tell me
so long
more.
as he's in Cleveland.
So at least he needs to move to a new team, right?
I think so.
All right.
This coming from a Bears fan, though, so I don't know
Okay.
that.
Final one here. You gotta think carefully about this one. This is probably my most insightful question. So recently, Google announced they're acquiring Wiz, and some hacks in the industry called the combination G Wiz. So within 12 months, the OT security company that's called Insane Cyber will buy the other OT security company called Sanctuary, and the combined company will be renamed to Insane Asylum. Is that visionary or is that high?
I don't know a lot about those companies, but I'd say that's high.
It's gonna happen though. Like, you gotta have your CEO go, yeah, we should do that. We should
That's
acquire this guys and
fantastic.
change the company name.
Oh, that's incredible.
Well, Steve, listen, this has been good fun chatting today. Appreciate all your insights. I know you guys are hiring. If someone wants to get in touch and jump on the train, how do they go about doing that?
Reach out. I mean, proactively through the website, through LinkedIn. There's tons of leaders that just reach out directly to us. Yeah, very excited. Thank you for the time today, Andrew. Enjoyed it greatly.
Yeah, it's been a blast. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.